the ILC, and I'm going to be chairing this webinar. Many thanks for joining us. This webinar is called Why is Longevity Important to Business? Where you're going to get an opportunity to meet the ILC Partners. And this webinar is indeed supported by the ILC Partners programme. So before we get started, there are a few housekeeping rules to go through. I'm sure most of you are familiar with these sorts of things now. Internet issues may affect video and sound, so please do bear with us if this occurs. At the bottom of your screen, you'll see a chat function to communicate with panelists and delegates, as well as a Q&A feature where we'll be collecting questions for the panelists. If you're having any issues with the audio or video throughout the webinar, try to connect with an Ethernet cable or through a hotspot on your phone. If you get disconnected, do just use the same link and the confirmation email to join back in. You're all invited to post comments on Twitter using hashtag #LongevityDividend and hashtag #LongevityBusiness, where we're recording this webinar, and it'll be published for public access on our website and a YouTube channel. So I'll just start with the question of ILC. What is ILC? So we are the UK specialist think tank on the impacts of longevity on society and what happens next. We are completely independent, we are non-partisan, politically neutral, and this enables us to look objectively at complex issues in relation to an ageing society. We use evidence-based research for policy, and we work collaboratively, often with our partners, to pioneer solutions for the future. Our work focuses on 3 strategic priorities. We're interested in unlocking the economic potential of an ageing society and maximising the benefits of longevity. And we're interested in how longevity impacts everybody in society. So we're interested in ensuring longer lives for the good of everybody. We're a futures organisation. We're interested in future-proofing policy and practice. So if we just move on to the next slide, please. So the Partners Programme, back again, please. So I'm just going to briefly run through the Partners Programme before we get started. I want to tell you a little bit about this programme, because this webinar is run for and by some of our partners. Our partners, as you can see from the panel and the slide here, come from a variety of sectors, but they all share a common interest, an interest in the topic of longevity. And that's where we come in. As I said, we're the UK specialist think tank on the topic, and we tend to provide 3 core benefits to our partners. We work closely with our partners to provide business intelligence. So for example, we'll give you advance notice on the latest research and briefings on longevity. We'll work very closely with you and coordinate discussion groups and workshops to share our work, to get your ideas and develop new ideas and ask what happens next. Our networks in the longevity space are unparalleled, from industry and policymakers to international organisations and the charity sector. Our partners of events have included visits to Number 10, briefings with prominent influencers, as well as the opportunity to meet ministers and policy experts and fellow partners. There are also a brand benefits. So as a partner, you'll be visible through our numerous events, webinars like this one, press releases, presentations, and we give you the opportunity to be positioned at the heart of the longevity debate. So today we're going to hear from a panel of expert speakers, all partners of ILC. And they'll explore why the topic of longevity is important to them, why it's important to their business, how they're responding to the opportunities and challenges of longevity. We'll hear from a range of partners across the business sector, from finance to consulting, retirement, housing and care. And we'll get an insight and a response from the ageing sector too. We'll then want to hear your questions in the Q&A section. We've already had some great questions coming through, which is fantastic. So please do submit your questions to our speakers using the Q&A feature at the bottom bar of your screen, and join the conversation on Twitter. Please do using @ILCUK and hashtag #LongevityDividend and hashtag #LongevityBusiness. So we're now going to quickly move on to the panel presentations. I'm going to start with Martin Jones, who's up first. Martin's the CEO of Home Instead Senior Care. He's responsible for leading the UK operation at Home Instead. He works closely with government, key organisations and charities campaigning on wider social issues and works to ensure the voice of the older generation is heard. Homestead have recently just joined as an ILC partner, so we're delighted to have them on board. I'll now hand over to Martin. Thank you.
Thank you, Redford, and good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you all here today. I think I just want to give you a brief outline of what Homestead Senior Care is all about, just for people who don't really know. In terms of Homestead Senior Care, we provide care for the elderly in their own home to ensure that they're safe, secure and happy and where they want to be. So our mission is to change the face of ageing. We've got a network of offices around the UK, over 225 offices providing care to over 14,000 clients. And we're also the largest home care provider. Globally, we're in 12 countries, which gives us a complete different spectrum and tapestry of data and information, which some of our other colleagues in the sector probably haven't got. But also in terms of the other things I do, I sit on the ageing workforce in terms of the BITC. I'm a trustee for the Care Workers Charity, Age UK, and I'm the chair of Silverline, which is all about loneliness and supporting older people. So I'm very entrenched in longevity and actually supporting the future and helping shape that future for the UK. So we can go into our next slide, please. Really what I was focused on in terms of, we all know the stats, and we all know the opportunity, if you like, and we all know that we have to change now to enable a better future for our ageing population. There's no surprise that the ageing population, is greater than the younger population, but there's a massive opportunity ahead of us all to really harness the skills of our ageing population. And in Homestead, we deliberately spend time focusing on the Asian population. Most of our caregivers, and we've got just shy of 14,000, are over the age of 55, and that's because of the life knowledge and experience that they bring. Go on to the next slide, please. So if we really take this opportunity that's ahead of us in terms of and harness this opportunity, it really will support economic growth. But we need to do a few things. We need to stand up to ageism, and you would have heard and saw things about this, I'm sure, for quite some time. But if you ever bought a birthday card for someone who's 60, the pictures on the front of that birthday card are of pipe and slippers, etc. And a lot of people now at that age, the 60s, is a new 40. So we need to adapt for longer working lives and consider the needs of older people in all the decision making. In terms of, if you even look at the retail sector, the spectrum of choice for our Asian population is actually diminished. So I think Mike Hoden, in terms of Global Coalition on Aging, it's a great quote, which he said there, reached a milestone. The once extravagant prospect of growing old has become the new norm. So I think that really just shaped in terms of what we've got to do. So what can businesses do? We can go on to the next slide, please. So sorry, the next slide, sorry. So an insight into older people's thoughts. So, many older people now actually do want to stay employed, in terms of there's not that kind of belief and change that people are working towards this target age anymore. Our survey of over 65 told us that 25% felt they left work just too soon, and there's a big sense of purpose they have when they're actually continue to work. And there's a survey from Aegon in terms of 73% said they wanted to work beyond the retirement age. And that's because actually some people may have to, but a lot of people actually want to. And that's why we target a lot of our caregivers well into their 80s and into their 90s. And just to give some real life experience in terms of Shirley, who was a caregiver, she sent me a letter, and she was a caregiver, I think, in one of our Newcastle offices. And it was really just saying, Martin, I just want to thank you for your experience of working with Homestead, great company, and really enjoyed myself. But she said, I think it's now time for me to put my feet up and let some of the younger generation take over the mantle and become a caregiver. Shirley was 91. So, you know, it just shows in terms, it was the power of the man that she carried on working to when she wanted to work. But we have to create that new flexible working model for that multi-generational workforce. It's so, so critical. Can you just go to the next slide, please? And again, just carrying on, you know, just a case study, if you like. Oh, go back. Oh, sorry. No, go back to Barbara's slide. Thank you. People are getting click happy on the slides, I think. So Barbara's worked for Cadbury for over 25 years. And this is what we do. We actually target people from different walks of life in terms of now, due to COVID, there's a lot of people from different industries actually coming to Home Instead. And now she's completely changed her career and spent many, many happy years at our Chester office. You can just go on to the next slide, please. So what do we need to do? We need to recognise that older people actually do want to work. They may want to work more flexibly, may want to work different hours, but that's really important. And consider the needs of older people in decision making, not just in terms of the working environment, but also in terms of the wider society. And discuss openly with our existing workforces. You know, don't put people in boxes, don't put people in terms of a different age group, they're thinking of different things. Let's have those open conversations. Let's have those, you know, midlife reviews, if you like, but actually be collaborative in terms of how they can support and help you grow your business in terms of a better place. And then last slide, please, I think. Yeah, I just wanted to, again, bring it home to what it's all about, and that's, you know, what we're here to discuss longevity. You know, again, this is a great example that June, she's 83 years old, she's working in our Sheffield office, and she's actually looking after a lady who's 69, and she absolutely loves it because, you know, it keeps her active, it keeps her engaged with other people. She's got a social network, you know, and obviously providing some income. So it's a tick, tick, tick for June, whichever way. So, you know, just wanted to start off the presentation, bringing it back to what it's about, some real life examples and how we should adapt and change in terms of our workforce. Thank you. Over to you, Redford.
Redford, do you want me to just start talking? Is that best? Can people see and hear me?
I think Redford has gone quiet, so I think Mary, yes.
Apologies.
Okay, you can see and
apologies.
hear me.
I was on mute. Mary, I will just do a very quick introduction. So, thank you, Mary. Mary's the expert on ageing at Phoenix Group, the largest life and pensions consolidator in Europe. The group specialises in the acquisition and management of heritage life insurance and pension funds. And Phoenix are also a new ILC partner. So fantastic to have you on board, Mary. Thank you. And thank you, Martin, for your initial presentation there. Great to start off with some real world examples and position the discussion. And I'll now pass over to Mary. Thank you, Mary.
Thanks very much. And thanks, Martin, for that intro. I love June. I want to go and meet her. Now, I've not got any slides, so there's going to be no forward back comments from me, but that does mean that I'm heavily reliant on notes. So you may see me glancing off to the side. I'd like to talk to you about three things. The first one, very quickly, is a little bit more about who Phoenix are and why that means we are so committed to longevity and why it's really, really core to who we are and what we do. And really just thinking about that question of why is longevity important to businesses? The second one is to tell you a bit more about why it's important to me and why I think it should be important to you, what I think that business opportunity is, and to bring a few numbers in. And then finally, and very briefly, I'd like to just touch on the current challenges that we have for perceptions of longevity, economics, and for the business world, and what we might be able to do about that. Redvers, I know you're keeping an eye on the Q&A. If there's a particularly apposite question that comes in, just pause and I will try to answer it. Otherwise, we can collate them for later on. So, who are Phoenix? As Redvers says, we're the largest long-term savings and retirement business in the UK. So, as of last month, we have over 14 million policyholders, and we manage over 300 billion of assets. And that gives us much more than just a financial responsibility. It means that we are utterly accountable, providing safety and security for our customers, and to have that strong financial performance to give them peace of mind. But underneath that is a much broader social purpose, and sustainability is a part of that. It's how we invest our £1/3 trillion. Everything we do is going to be judged against those sustainability principles, and sustainability of society, of community, and of life chances is a part of that. So if of your business you have a purpose statement, and we all do, that is linked towards making a difference for people, longevity is a part of that. So longevity is an intrinsic part of all of our business models because of the UK demographics. And, you know, at its most simple, that's why we care. I'm not going to talk about longevity numbers because everybody at ILC does that with much more fluency than I do. But it's a fact that with that increasing longevity, people have a choice of really either three things. They need to work for longer, they need to save more, or they need to anticipate an older age with less money. And you know what, that's not a message that I really like hearing or giving, but to enable people to do something about that in a positive way, our business needs to communicate with customers all through the life stages to enable them to make good choices, to enable them to understand longevity and the consequence of that, and to deal with it in a positive way and with confidence. Because you know, if I didn't work in pensions, frankly, I would be really, really confused. And when we talk to our customers, they are often quite confused. So a few years ago, we had pension freedoms, which meant you could access your pension age 55. We've had an increase in state pension age, which means you need to work for longer, or you can't access your state pension age till you're older. We've had the removal of the default pension age, so there's no age at which you need to retire from a job. And we've had auto-enrolment, which has brought people in to pension savings from the beginning of their careers. And looking back even further, we had something called the Retail Distribution Review, which was a positive in many ways, but had the unintended consequence, I think, of meaning that the mass middle, normal people in Britain can't access really good advice about this pensions confusion without spending quite a lot of money. So our reason for caring in Phoenix is because it's a big problem for society, and because it's something that affects pretty much all of our customers. But if I just touch a little bit more on those generations, we've got 5 generations in the workforce, and I mentioned auto-enrolment for those people who are young in the workforce, who will go through all of their life having an awareness of savings. Then you look at people like me, late 40s, I wish, early 50s, who don't have defined benefit, so that guaranteed final salary pension, and so we're reliant on defined how much we've managed to save in our lifetimes. We're the Gen X. We are the generation that neither has that security of people over 60 who tend to know what they're going to get to a much greater extent, nor those who are under 30, under 40, who have time to make a difference. Us Gen Xers are quite challenged, and we need to understand that more. So to that, Phoenix are co-producing a report with ILC on Gen X, which will be produced for the 10th anniversary of the Pensions Commission. And I hope, Rebels, you might say something about that later on, because I'm really worried about that generation. My generation, it's personal, because I talk to my friends in the pub and most of them have no idea how they're going to afford to retire. So this goes back to why is it important? Because we need to talk to customers, we need to talk to people. And And this goes straight on to my next point, which is about the numbers, the business case. I'd said I'd talk about why it's important for me, why it's important for you, and who Phoenix are. I've done that a bit. I'm now going to talk about the numbers a little bit more. So if the global over 50s population were a sovereign state in terms of its spending power, it would be the third biggest economy in the world by GDP. And it's the section, it would be the sovereign state that's growing the fastest. So simplistically, as a business, we have an opportunity to target that, I would say. In the UK, we have 50% of consumer spending is from over 50s, and 3/4 of the wealth is in the older age group. So for any business, whether or not you're involved in savings, that global wealth, the opportunity, the size of that group is utterly compelling. And if I think about, well, which groups would that be for the private sector? It might be creation of products and services that people will consume because they're attractive, and Martin is a great example of that. Equally, Home Instead look at solving problems that that people want to pay for. How do we solve the problem of people wanting to stay in their own homes? If we look at the housing sector, a tiny percentage of UK housing stock is suitable for adaptive living, and yet other countries are doing way more. So if I just look at a really common feature, we all need to live somewhere. What, for those who are involved in the housing industry, are we doing for that mass market that is older and growing bigger every year? Or it could be providing solutions to prevent some of the issues and concerns around ageing. So that massive opportunity, very big numbers, hugely important for all of us, because frankly, if it's not important to you, then you're not going to get older. And the alternative, as somebody said, taxes, or the alternative, actually taxes are the more beneficial choice. So there is a financial opportunity, there's a demographic opportunity, but there are some challenges. None of us have a single solution. Government is caught up with a lot of other things and doesn't have the solutions either. So what that means to me is we need to work together. We need to look at the societal, the economic, the governmental, and the policy interventions that are needed to make longevity a success for more people, a happier place for more people. And for those of us in the UK, I think there's an opportunity to make the UK a global leader in this longevity economy. If I just talk about employment for a moment, because this is where another place where I think all of us as businesses can benefit. Twice the number of people leave the workforce during age to those who join it. So we have a shrinking workforce, which at the current moment may not be too much of a problem. But overall, the skills and experience of older people it's hugely important, and multi-generational workforces bring a great deal. So I'm going to quote a couple of studies here, one from McKinsey, one from Forbes, which have 3 percentages. First one is 21%, the second one is 33%, and the third one is 87%. And it's not a test for dementia. I'm not going to ask you those stats again. The 21% is businesses who have a good ethnic mix. The 21% is a gender mix will outperform. 33% is a gender and ethnic mix. And the 87% is gender, ethnicity, and age, making better decisions and outperforming peers. Now, that age dimension is one that is so often missed from the inclusion spectrum. But the perspective that experience, emotional intelligence, the perspectives of having lived through the previous age groups gives us is something that really shouldn't be underestimated and should be an active part of any diversity and inclusion strategy. And that's really me bringing in a third point around why businesses should care. Should care because your customers are a massive part of your customer base, because it's a part of your business purpose. Should care because there is a massive economic impact from this, and those numbers are enormous and hopefully speak for themselves. And lastly, because having a multi-general workforce will mean you have a better workforce that makes better decisions more of the time. If that doesn't answer the business case, frankly, I'm not sure what more I can do. I think I've answered all of the challenges around that, but do feel free to challenge me, because I love a good debate on this. The last section I said I would speak about, and Redvers, give me a nod if I need to wrap up.
It's okay. We got, maybe if you want to just finish your,
A few more minutes. Okay, a couple more minutes.
Yeah.
So current challenges, COVID, literally 2 minutes. In the UK, over the past 4 years, we have got 1 million more, roughly, people over 50 into the workforce. And that was based off some excellent ILC previous research that showed that there were broadly 1 million more people over the age of 50 who wanted to work who couldn't. So we set about doing a long-term piece of work to address those barriers. Great success. And earlier this year, we were feeling pretty confident that we had done a good job. Since COVID, over 2 million over 50s have been put on furlough, and the latest economic and employment forecasts are that around 1 million over 50s will lose their jobs. So over the space of 6 months, we will have lost 4 years of employment growth in the over 50s. Now, we talk a lot about youth. I'd like to talk about something else. I'd like to talk about a U-shape. Undoubtedly, young people in the UK and globally have been massively affecting their employment prospects. But a person over the age of 50 who becomes unemployed is less likely to get another job than a person of any other age. And so if I lose my job tomorrow, if you're over 50, you lose your job tomorrow, you are just way more unlikely to get another job. And that is going to create a whole set of other challenges for businesses, for society, and for government down the line. So I'd just like to leave you with that thought. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mary. Some fantastic points there. How do we deal with the Generation X problem? What are we going to do about unemployment and the impact on older people? And what is industry doing in that space, and how can industry make a positive impact? And that leads quite nicely on to our next speaker, Shaun Crawford, who is the Global Vice Chair of Industry at EY. He oversees more than 60,000 industry specialists through 16 global sectors. And EY is at the forefront of industry disruption and convergence issues. So Shaun's very much focused on enabling EY to develop innovative sector-specific solutions to address big issues facing business today, of which this is one, and what we're talking about right now. So Shaun, I will hand over to you, and a nice segue for you there, I think.
Thank you, Redvers. Yeah, if you just pull up my slide, that would be fantastic. Yeah, great segue. Thank you. Yeah, so look, the big question for I'm trying to answer here is, why is EY supporting longevity agenda? So EY has about 300,000 people globally. It's a significant workforce. We have obligations as well as a need to support our people through all stages of their life. In the UK, in the UK specifically, the average age of our staff is about 27, and we have a rule, like all the big four professional services companies, big accounting companies, that our partners retired when about 60 years old. So other staff can stay on to older, to have longer careers with EY, but that's the partnership model. And I can assure you, by the time you reach the 60 in EY, which I am just about to reach, you've had enough anyway. So it's not as bad as it might look. But the important thing is, we need to make sure, and what we have done is put a really big, strong focus on longevity and how do we look after our people, particularly in the latter years of their careers at EY, because they're going to move on. They're going to be going on to other businesses. They're going to be going to non-exec roles. They'll be onto mentor roles, moving on to charities, all sorts of things. It's very important for us that we look after them. So there's 3 areas I'm going to talk on. The first two predominantly of the few minutes I've got. First of all, we provide what we call a senior partners transition support. And this really involves a few things. One is that basically a transition program for all our UK staff, and actually, of course, our European staff, which identifies partners and some of the more other senior managers 5 years out from leaving the company, and supporting them with what we call finishing strong guidance from guidebooks, videos, tailored coaching, transition preparation courses, and market preparation, like as via CV production and networking guidance. This has been running for about 7 years now, and we've had a lot of commercial success with these people who've gone on to even more better careers after they've left EY. It may just be an NED position, but we profile about 30 different career choices in the transition preparation for them. We have a workshop we call a future direction workshop, which we run for them. They can plan to be a writer, a blogger, a consultant, a startup inventor, a business mentor, etc. And that's something that we run for everybody in the firm. The next area is around what we call a partner alumni network. And this is basically creating longevity through the community of peers who within EY who share industry insight, webcasts, roles in the market, and providing connections to each other, as well as a place to work. They can hold their board meetings and have some social dining space. Within financial services, particularly where I've grown up through, we have about 170 people currently in the UK who are a member of that network. And we make sure we look after them, feed them, support them through their careers going forward. The third area is what we call skills and experience upskilling, where longevity is also enhanced what we call from diverse experiences before they leave our company. We've paid partners to be matched to charities, to sit on charity boards, to let them dip their toes, we say, in the water before they go back into society. Business mentorships, becoming part of seed fund managers, or CEO of charities. It's also tailored to their particular interests, as well as the job experiences with boards, clients, and services. And then the final thing we do is we call a career MOT, so independent career conversations every 3 years. And this is for all our staff to examine their career path, long-term plans, and support by the firm, in addition to annual development review with their counsellor. And this is all built into their objectives and their boss's objectives as they go through their career. The next stage then I'll talk about is the well-being care, and this is a very important area too. So we've now put in a sort of part-time flexible working option for all partners, with a new sabbatical term allowable after 5 years of service. So after 5 years of service with our company, they can go on a year, 2 years sabbatical if they need to, and come back knowing that their job will be safe to come back. We hold an ambassador program, because we know that many of our team, it's really, we talk about this sort of a sleeping tiger in the workforce around carers, where we know there's no real statistics, but we know an increasing theme of staff taking time off to look after caring for their parents, for other members of their family, maybe grandparents, etc. And that gives them, including in compressed hours to support medical requirements, etc. We know that there's a strong growing number of our employees who are these sort of carers. And we also recognize they're not qualified carers. We also recognize that they're going to need, they're doing this with not necessarily the right preparation. So we're providing support to help them ensure and make sure they're aware. Now, clearly in the time we just had now for the last 6 or 7 months, that's made life easier, not so ways of people working at home, but also it's been tougher because we've had this exclusivity, we're not allowed to see other parts of the family. So that's something that we've been very conscious about, and we've been making sure we're calling into our people and speaking to our people to understand what else they might be going through this tough time. We have an EY family network, an age network. So it's basically it's great success in profiling stressful family issues in the firm and bringing market-leading advisors to support families, etc. And we have obviously like a private health scheme, which also, when we look at it, when we go through where the bulk of the health issues come through, it often comes through, 90% of it comes through stress of some description. And quite often that stress is not necessarily stress in the workplace, it's stress with dealing with the workplace with stressful home lives. And so again, dealing with that, supporting that, and recognizing this is a real issue is something that's been very, very important to us. And most of those, as you can imagine, a lot of those illnesses and stresses are in the older part of the population of our employees, and then so taking care and looking after them becomes ever more important. So we look also for the senior members, and as people leave the firm and as they move on to the next stage of their career, we're looking for them also to be mentors for the younger population. I mentioned the average age 27. We take a load of graduates. We've actually taken a load of interns and non-graduates, and 1,000 non-graduates in this year into the UK. Now, these people need mentoring and support, and having some of these older people who are I probably shouldn't say the word older, I apologize, but people at later stages in their career, spending time with them is extremely valuable. And the feedback is just phenomenal, that these people are putting their time and their expertise and listening to them. So we really encourage that. The final point here, I think Martin mentioned the business in the community. So this is something that we are playing a very major part with, and we're really trying to work with the 5 key areas: focus for responsible business, of which one key area is around the positive age culture, multi-generational teams. I think Mary mentioned the fact that the ILC, the good ILC, great ILC work around the million over 50 work, but also the BITC did some work again a couple of years ago when they basically talked about there's currently 30% of the workforce over 50, and in 2030 it'll be 50%. And as Mary also said, around the issues we've had with COVID and the problems of people who made unemployment and furloughing, etc., this has become an increased issue. We made a decision very early on that we would not furlough any staff, and we haven't furloughed one person in the UK since this has started. We don't have no plans to, and it's important that we want to make sure we show that care and show that looking after those people to support them through all these difficult times. But at the same time, recognizing that this longevity agenda is going to be critical for our brand, for our people, and to making sure that everyone who comes through the experience of working with our company believes it as a value-added experience and actually feels good, and actually clearly from a good support in the rest of the market. So Redford, does that hope that covers what you want from me?
Shaun, that was great. Thank you very much. I'm just conscious of time, so the next speakers, if you would be so kind to keep to around 5 minutes each, that would be fantastic. Just so that we have more time for questions at the end, because that's the fun part. So I'm going to move on to Harriet now. Harriet Dunstan, Head of Marketing at Audley Group. Please take it away, Harriet. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Redvers. And that was very interesting, Shaun. EY sounds like a fantastic place to work. So I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about Audley Groups. This is changing away from the working environment for older people and more about where they live and how they live their lives. If you go on to the next slide, please, just to give you a little bit of an overview about what Audley Group does. So we're the leading provider in the UK of luxury and high quality retirement villages. We've got 21 sites across England. We haven't got any in Scotland or Wales or Northern Ireland yet. But predominantly we develop and operate retirement villages for people over 55. Now over 55 and retirement, as we've talked about, that doesn't necessarily go hand in hand, and a lot of our property owners do still work, of course. Unfortunately, there's a real issue in the sector of how we class, what we call ourselves, and there's been all kinds of research into it, but it's sort of universally acknowledged that retirement communities or retirement villages is the most accepted term at the moment until we can find an appropriate solution. We also, within our retirement villages, it's not just about property, but it's about health services, care, similar to the services that Martin provides at home. Instead, we have Audley Care, which provides care to people in their own homes and around the communities surrounding our retirement villages. And we have restaurants and health clubs as well within the villages that we're open to the public too. If you go on to the next slide, please. I'm just going to race through these 2 slides. This is just to give you an example of what the Audley villages look like, typically heritage buildings that we renovate, luxurious facilities. Then onto the next slide, it says Mayfield Villages, which is our new brand, launched in 2015, and we're working on construction of our first village at the moment in Watford, and this will be a mid-market product, so still with the same high quality facilities and accommodation that Audley Villages has, but on a larger scale and in locations that we might not have gone to for Audley Villages, which means that we can broaden the appeal to the mid-market and to more people. So on to the next slide, just talk a little bit about some of the issues that we come up against as our population ages. Next slide, please. Oh, no, slide before. One back. The one with a picture of stairs on it. Anyway, I'll start talking. Fantastic, thank you very much. So one of the major issues is, as people are living longer, they tend to be staying in their family homes for longer. That has several impacts on society as a whole, in terms of freeing up the housing market, but also people realizing that their homes aren't suitable for them as they age. And there's a picture there of stairs, and obviously there are solutions around things like that, but it's also to do with isolation. They may be living in a big family home that requires a lot of maintenance, and it just feels a little bit too much for them. So that's one issue that our customers come up against. Likewise with health as well. Staying in your own home is an option, and certainly the care services that can be provided help with that. But more often than not, any health deterioration, if somebody isn't living in suitable housing, means that there is an over-reliance on local healthcare services, particularly the NHS, but also private care services as well. And lastly, there's a misfocus from the government on how to solve the current housing crisis. I mean, housing and care crisis, but the housing crisis there's been a lot of focus over the last couple of years, in particular, on building lots of starter homes, reducing stamp duty for first-time buyers, without really considering the other end of that funnel, so to speak. It's a horrible term, a funnel, but as I mentioned before, if we could encourage people to move out of their large family homes, that they don't need that space anymore, then that frees up the property ladder to help people move up. So we certainly need to be lobbying the governments to put more of a focus on older people and incentivizing people to move into places that will be more suitable for them as they age. Onto the next slide very quickly, just to show you the possibility for growth within the housing with care sector. Mary mentioned before that there's a huge number of people who aren't living in suitable housing for them. In the UK, at the moment, there's only 0.6% of people over the age of 65 who are living in retirement communities, as opposed to higher figures in the likes of Australia and New Zealand and the USA. So there is a massive potential there within our country. And just onto the next slide. So this is just to touch on care a little bit more, and I'm hoping that Martin would agree with me on this, but historically care has been treated as a last resort. So it's something that everybody dreads, that you've got the option of staying in your own home while you're well, or then you have to go into a care home or need to have care, and that's seen as a negative thing. I think one solution to the issue of health within longevity is to approach care from a very different perspective and looked at in a much more holistic view, along with mental health services, financial support, and look at every aspect of a customer's life to keep them happier and well for longer, so that care can be integrated within all of those services rather than it being a last resort requirement. Onto the last slide, it's just a summary slide of those challenges. So as I mentioned, back again. Yes, I mentioned about the overall government, but also within local planning authorities. One of the challenges is to explain to them why housing with care has such a benefit to the local community. I mentioned about the impact on NHS services, but also to the community as a whole. There's a lot of pressure to build affordable homes, but also, it's very, very important that we have this sort of housing for older people within that community as well. So there's a big job we've got there. There's also there's a very big problem with getting customers themselves to understand what the options are. I said before that people think that you can stay in your own home or you have to go to a care home. There are many, many other alternatives, but it can get quite confusing when you start to research those options. So we've got a big job to do there. And also we're competing against larger residential builders. In the UK, there isn't a huge amount of land. You know, it goes at a premium, and we are competing against the likes of large house builders who can spend more money. So, you know, my last statement would just be, if I think about what the impact on our business is of longevity, the older people live, the more demand there is for housing with care, and we just need to find a way to supply that demand. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Harriet. Some great points there. Freeing up the property ladder, a massive incentive surely for government, the power of integrated care, but then this general lack of understanding amongst customers, but potentially also across government as well. That was great. I'm now going to introduce Richard Purcell. So Richard leads the product innovation services within the life sciences and financial services practice at Hyman Robertson. And I'm now going to pass over to Richard to do his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. And I thought I'd just say a bit more about Hyman Robertson and who we are, what we do. We are a firm of consulting actuaries, and for the past 100 years or so, we've been working with government, pension schemes, employers and insurers to help them understand and manage longevity risk and think about the financial implications for them and society at large, I suppose, and helping to ensure better financial futures for themselves and their members and customers. And in terms of how we're responding to the challenges and opportunities of longevity, we're doing it primarily through data, I would say. And we've done this through also our sister longevity analytics business called Crawford, which aggregates lots of anonymized data from hundreds of pension schemes across the UK, representing about 1 in 4 defined benefit pension members in the UK. Gives us a really rich, diverse data set to understand or begin to understand longevity. And we believe, you know, data is the key to understanding longevity. It means we can better understand the risk. You know, what is the chance of someone living longer than expected? What are the drivers for those variations or increases in longevity over time? For example, we find that socioeconomic status is such an important predictor of longevity, and it's important for then financial institutions to understand this to make sure they can provide benefits for their members long into the future. Data can also provide a common currency. If everyone has the same way of viewing and measuring risk, it makes it much easier to be able to transfer that risk around the market and to help everyone manage the risk of society living longer. And it can also then support the creation of new markets and solutions. So some of the specific drivers and challenges we're focused on and helping our clients and other businesses are ensuring longevity and providing guarantees around longevity. So this could be in the context of individuals, annuities to provide a retirement income or to pay for care costs. It could also be bulk annuities or longevity swaps for very large institutions like pension schemes and insurers to help manage their longevity risk. These products can help transfer the risk between organizations and individuals, but also provide more certainty to those groups and protect against any uncertainty or variation in longevity in the future. And I think another key one is individuals and their own planning for their future. As Mary mentioned, there's a significant reduction in advice now, and there's a lot more responsibility generally for individuals to plan their own retirement. So how do we help people do that when there's fewer advisors than there used to be? So that's an area where we think there's a need to engage and to support individuals through tools, and that's something that we've been working with, looking at ways of making it very simple for customers to understand their options and to present actionable things that they can do to improve the chances of generating the income they need in retirement, for example. And care is another really important area, which I'll come back to in just a moment. I just wanted to think about COVID-19 for a moment. This has created a whole new set of challenges in respect of understanding the impact it has on long-term longevity, and really we need to collect an awful lot more data before we understand what the impact's going to be long-term. But it's an area where we are beginning to work through, what are the potential drivers of the impact in the long term. There could be some positives. There could be changes in behaviour, people more likely to get a flu jab in the future. There might be changes in funding for healthcare in the future, having realised the importance of it. But we know there's also going to be some negative impacts, the impact of the long-term effects of people having suffered with COVID-19, people that haven't suffered from COVID-19 but haven't been able to access treatment during lockdown. That's going to have an impact on them in the long term. And then there's also the impact of austerity and recession. We know that tends to have an impact on life expectancy long term as well. So lots of unknowns there, and lots to think about in terms of COVID-19. But I think another theme there is digitization. So aside from the impact on longevity itself, we're seeing within financial services an acceleration of using digital solutions to help customers access advice and support in the absence of the same face-to-face support, and making it easier for them to choose which products are right for them, and to also access and claim on those products. And then just to finish up, I suppose, just to point to something we've done with the ILC in the past, is working on a report on adult social care. This obviously, a big area that we've covered already in today's webinar, and there's significant challenges, and one where we think we need to see more collaboration with government, but also care providers, individuals, and local authorities, but also insurers as well, because there will be a need for more financial solutions to help alleviate some of the immense financial pressures that will come down the line. And I think and that's a really important area. So overall, I think there's lots of challenges in respect of an aging population, but also we believe opportunities by leveraging data to help us do that, and to improve the financial outcomes for individuals and society at large. That's all from me. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Richard. That was fantastic. So we've heard from our partners in the business world so far, and we're going to turn to one of our long-standing partners now, experts in aging, Aging Better, Emily Andrews. So Emily Andrews is a senior evidence manager at Aging Better. If we could just move the slide on, please. And Emily's responsible for overseeing all of the evidence work under Aging Better's priority goal of fulfilling work, which is about making sure that Aging Better have the right information to understand how we can get more people aged 50 to 69 into fulfilling work. So Emily's a great individual to have as a responder to the industry experts that have just been presenting, but also to provide Aging Better's perspective. So let's hand over to Emily, and if we could just move on to the next slide, that'd be great.
Thanks very much, Redbers. Thanks for having me, and what an incredibly rich set of speakers we've had. So I won't say too much, because I think we want to get into the questions, and we've got so much there. So I'm from the Centre for Aging Better. We're a charity funded by an endowment from the National Lottery Community Fund, and we work to create a society where everyone enjoys later life, which I suppose is another way of saying a society which maximises the benefits of longevity. And we do research, we do innovation work, and we also do influencing to try and understand what those changes are that need to happen, and then work with the people who can make those changes happen to create that society that we want. We focus on 4 domains of action that we think should be priorities, which are health, housing, community connections, and fulfilling work, which, as Redbers has said, is what I work on. And our focus is often very specifically around interventions that can take place in midlife, so in the 50s and 60s, which will then have a knock-on effect to how we age. So, as Redbers has said, one of our goals is to increase the number of people in their 50s and 60s in fulfilling work. And it's been really great to hear panelists talk about the benefits of that from their perspective of employers, and Mary giving very passionate advocacy around the benefits of that. So I don't want to retread those points around the benefits to employers and workers. We've already heard those. There's also, of course, the fiscal benefits, as to the economy, to the public purse, which is what's driven the policy activity that Mary was referring to, that to extend working lives. If you want to understand those fiscal benefits, I would wholeheartedly recommend you read the ILC's Maximising the Longevity Dividend Report, and I can say that because it wasn't anything to do with me, and I think it's a really, really fantastic book. So really recommend that. So, you know, we've talked a lot about these benefits, and again, as has been alluded to, I think there's no question that COVID does put the benefits of an aging workforce into jeopardy. You know, we've already heard the kind of brief summation of the emerging picture of the post-COVID labour market is that it's the younger workers who will be hit by the kind of really big mass unemployment and kind of large numbers in terms of losing their jobs. But then when it comes to returning to work, it's going to be people in their 50s and 60s who lose their jobs, who will struggle potentially the most. And this is what kind of previous evidence suggests to us, who will struggle the most to return and take the longest. And I think that's kind of partly, you know, we can think about people, you know, applying for hundreds of jobs. That's the story that you hear and not managing to get them. But also, I think we need to be mindful of people who might choose to write themselves out of the workforce and kind of take early retirement, become economically inactive. And in the kind of high level labour market statistics, we are seeing a bit of an uptick in economic inactivity amongst the very oldest workers, and that, you know, that might not be that. So you might have people kind of thinking they feel they need to take early retirement, they should leave jobs for the younger people, that they're not quite sure, they kind of don't have the confidence to put themselves out there in the labour market, and when that's really not what's best for them and what they actually want and need to do. So it's kind of, you know, it's not just it's kind of thinking about engaging people in wanting to kind of keep trying to be in work as well. And I mean, I don't want to talk too much about this, but what we do know is that the 50 plus age group has been consistently failed by back to work support in this country. And I think, and I hope that you'll all join our call to government to provide targeted, tailored support for older workers and older job seekers that recognises that, of course, a 60-year-old job seeker has very different needs to a 30-year-old job seeker. And if we want to actually stop, you know, prevent this potential surge in long-term unemployment among 50s and 60s, then it's that targeted, tailored support that we'll need. And you can read more about that in our recent report on a midlife unemployment crisis. So I could talk more about unemployment, but actually we're talking about the kind of positives here. So I actually wanted to finish my remarks and pick up what some people said, talking kind of about the positive side. So we have this whole programme about unemployment, but we also have a programme of work at the Centre for Ageing Better on age-friendly employment. I've seen some questions in the Q&A around what does age-friendly employment look like? What does it mean? And I think there's nothing like hearing it from the horse's mouth. It's, you know, so fantastic to hear from Martin and from Shaun about what they're actually, from employers, but what they're actually implementing. Really great examples of good practice. Our role in this landscape is to kind of bring together that knowledge, provide a bit of a framework for employers to draw on, kind of based on good practice and on research evidence and on innovation and testing new things. So we've got some guidance that we call the Age-Friendly 5, which sets out key areas for action for employers who want to maximise the benefits of the ageing workforce, which is a reality, you know, regardless of COVID. And of course, the most pertinent one right now is flexible working, which we've heard quite a lot about, and we've heard about why it's important for us as we get older, for health reasons, for caring reasons, but also for some other things. You know, the main reason why people retire is because they want to. You know, and flexible work allows everyone to do both, to kind of, you know, do other things, but also do. So
I can't quite hear. Are we going back in? Yeah.
And I'm just going to keep talking. We also have a project, so it's about ageism in the recruitment process, and we are working really exciting work to actually try and test out and develop some recruitment practices which kind of remove age bias from the recruitment process, which is really exciting. So keep eyes peeled for that next year. The other three are around supporting people with health conditions, creating an age-friendly culture. Again, we've heard a lot about that, you know, creating these multi-generational workforces, which research evidence has shown to improve the productivity of both younger and older workers, particularly when you're doing creative, innovative tasks. And finally, I always miss the last one. And career development, midlife MATs, which we've heard from Shaun. So that's a really whistle-stop tour, real insight into what we're doing, and I hope echoed what else you've heard today. We're really interested to work with employers to hear more about what you're doing. But again, I think my main message is, yes, there are things to worry about in this recession, but also, you know, all of this effort that's happened over the last decade and all that's still going, all the workers that employers are still doing to make the best of the aging workforce, that's still really perhaps even more relevant post-COVID, because we need all of us, including older workers, to get through this.
Brilliant, Emily, thank you. That was great, and a lot of really interesting points. I think we'd be keen to come back to around encouraging business to become age friendly, and different thoughts around that we can help feed into. But I'm going to now go back to some of the earlier panelists on questions, and actually, I just wanted to say firstly thank you to everybody who's just presented. I think that was great. We're going to now look at all of the questions that have been coming throughout. If you still have more questions, please do put them through to the Q&A tab and choose your questions, and please reference the panelist as well. And once we've answered these questions, they'll be marked as answered in the Q&A tab, so you won't see them there. Now, I'm going to go back to Martin, actually. So Emma Luddington wanted to know what you thought about the question around what's the bigger challenge, resourcing the rising demand for domiciliary care, or influencing the government? And could be a slightly sort of trick question there, and potentially Harriet or Emily, actually you might want to come in after Martin. But Martin, please let us know what you think about that, around that balance between demand and influencing the government.
Yeah, I think they're probably intrinsically linked, aren't they? But I think for me, certainly from my seat and what I do, I think I think quite a few of the panelists have said and play a big part in terms of thought leadership and influencing government in terms of the policy and the thinkings, and the Cabinet Commission which is going on at the moment. I think that's absolutely key critical in terms of longevity and influencing the way government think and plan for people's later life. I think Emily's just talked about, actually, I think government at the moment is, I wouldn't say rudderless, but I think they've not quite grasped in terms of the age wave. I mean, a lot of people talk about it, they hear about it everywhere, but they've not actually grasped it in terms of the issues that will create, and therefore the policies they need to provide, but also the opportunities that will create as well. I don't think they've quite grasped that side of it as well. So for me, I think it's more about the influencing as much as we possibly can the policy side, and in terms of, but also what that looks like as you grow old. And then growing old today is going to feel and look very different to growing old in 5-10 years time. There's a lot of things that will affect that, not in terms of employment, but also in terms of technology, in terms of the workforce. So in terms of how we grow old and now is going to look and feel very, very different. I mean, we talk about in Homestead, being a very personal experience. What's personal today is going to change, and expectations are going to change as the different generations come through in terms of what their expectations of how they want to be looked after in later life. So I think it's influencing government involved in terms of highlighting the issues, but actually highlighting the opportunities that lie ahead of them and of the community.
Yeah,
I agree with that completely, and I sort of feel like every year, budget, or there'll be promises of a social care white paper or housing white paper, and it sort of gets superseded by whoever shouts the loudest, and older people get forgotten about very easily.
I mean, ideally, we probably need, there's been a lot of talk about having some sort of minister for older people, or some sort of real champion. We had a minister for loneliness, and that started to create some sort of traction in that area. We probably haven't got anybody that really bangs a drum for our older population. I know we've got a lot of charities doing a lot of great things, but to have one person really speaking on behalf of them would be a step forward. Wouldn't solve it. I think Harriet's right in terms of with the green paper, white paper. We've heard today that, again, the social care paper is going to be pushed back into next year in terms of, and COVID's going to get blamed. Well, actually, COVID's the here and now and the challenge ahead of us, but actually this isn't a new issue. This, and the aging population isn't new. We can look to China and different countries. They're well ahead of us in this, in terms of how to deal with different things. There's a lot of good practice around the world that actually we could pull in to support us.
Yeah, I think, Absolutely, and your point at the start there, Martin, around, you know, older people, you know, it's going to look different for the younger people coming old, and it's going to involve a lot of planning and future proofing around that. And I'm interested to know, from an industry perspective, perhaps Shaun might want to come in here, and it actually links to a question from Jodie Starkman from IRC4HR. The question is, as you help global industry leaders prepare for and embrace change, how's aging and longevity influencing their plans? So how are they preparing for that change?
Yeah, so thanks. Yeah, thanks, Jodie. Thanks, Redford. I put a little answer, actually, my little answer in your question anyway, but I'll quick summarize it. So I think, look, some of the big challenges being faced by large companies at the moment is obviously disruptive technology is changing the world, and we've obviously seen this in spades. Like here we are, all on webcasts now, which we may not have been doing a year ago. Yeah. So you're seeing some more, and you're seeing a lot of the younger parts of the workforce who are much more technically literate, grabbing this quickly. They've been doing it since they're 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, maybe. So it's been fast. So what we're finding is that they don't necessarily have the experience of those particular companies. So what we're seeing, and what we're recommending a lot around now is how you match some of those top end skills among some of the more experienced people in the workforce, along with these more junior people. Now, I'm not saying about putting them as the bosses, because the danger is you put them the boss tells you what to do, and the youngster, it just responds, okay, boss, I'll go and do what you say. It's actually putting them alongside. So actually you leverage the experience at the same time as you may do some of the cool programming, blockchain activity, AI development, whatever it might be they might be doing for the business. So, and it's pretty critical, this, because quite often you see, I see a lot of fintechs and small technology companies coming through, and quite often they have a really good solution, but we haven't really worked out what the problem is yet. Yeah? There's lots of really cool stuff going on, and actually what you really need is the people who've had the experience of going through life in these roles, who know where the issues are going to come up, what the problems with that business process is, what the problem with that client interaction is, what that problem with that product might be. It all depends by different industry, but in all cases, the experience counts a lot, and the art is how you match that experience without drowning out the innovation of the younger experience coming through, if that makes sense. So it's how you create teams together which show that those skills are both valued, but not seen as one is leading the other, and etc. Yeah, so and that's about change culture, and that's quite difficult for organisations to grasp, especially large organisations who've been around for many years, who've got regimental models in place, process how you get promoted and what you do, and it requires a significant way of rethinking. It actually encourages the youth to stay in the business because they learn from these mentors, they learn a lot from that. At the same time, for experienced people, they feel valued. They feel they haven't come to the end of their career. They're seeing this really cool stuff being created because of their ideas and some of their thoughts of explaining how that process would work. And I would like to see a lot more of these technical fintech type organizations really spending more time with more experienced people. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to put myself into a job here, but it's quite good at this. But you know what I mean? How people can actually do, because I do think this is critically important, and we are really pushing at boards at senior levels to make sure they get that balance right, and not drowning out one or the other part of the demographic.
Would you also say, Shaun, it works both ways, doesn't it? It's also the experience one way to the younger generation, but also the guys you talk about getting experience from the younger guys as well. So it's reciprocal both ways in terms of that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if any of you read Jack Welch's book many years back, and it's a long time back, but Jack Welch had a whole chapter, one individual who was 22 years old, who basically, he created him as his mentor for his last couple of years of his business. It's really good, interesting. It's about 10 years old, this book now, maybe a lot older than that, but it's really interesting how he saw that picture. And you're absolutely right, Martin, making sure it is both ways, but all parties need to recognize they can learn from this.
Mm.
And particularly, again, just particularly around innovation, the research evidence suggests that it's when you're trying to do innovative, creative work that is when you see the most benefit from a multi-generational team.
Fully agree. Yeah, the multi-generation team, that's absolutely right. Yeah.
And on the multi-generational teams, Mary, you might have something to say here, and I'm interested to know, Phoenix seem to be doing some really strong stuff around promoting inclusivity. So perhaps you might want to say a couple of words about what it is you're doing.
Yeah, sure. Hang on. So underneath the inclusion and diversity stream, we've been really thinking about how we look at age across those, and it's more than an intersection. Also, I think we're all quite comfortable with the intersectionality of diversity characteristics, but age is slightly different in that it changes constantly throughout your life, fairly obviously. But what that means is that we've decided to put an age champion into each of our diversity strands, so that we're consciously asking, what does this mean for different of the 5 generations in the workplace? And how do we challenge ourselves on whether we are really creating a strategy to address that? And a really kind of obvious example would be our Pride network, which is absolutely vibrant, but doesn't have anybody over the age of 32 in it. And with 30% of our workforce over the age of 45, I'm just not buying that it's a 30 and under characteristic. So we are not doing enough to be inclusive across that characteristic to really reflect colleagues' experience. So it's something we're working really hard at, and looking at, I think Shaun mentioned that sort of talent bench of experience, and looking at how we can use that talent bench to go and mentor younger talent, and take some roles out of the business to put people together. So we're trying quite a lot of things, haven't yet got the results, but I think it's a really interesting challenge.
Thank you, Mary. For those of, just worth mentioning, for those of you listening in and using social media, please do come in with your tweets using #LongevityDividend and #LongevityBusiness to put your questions through to the audience, put your questions through to the Q&A function. Any other comments or ideas on what Mary said there, please feel free to do that. I'm gonna shift gears slightly. I want to move over to Richard and Harriet, because we've got a lot of questions here coming through. And Richard, one for you, I think perhaps from Emanuela Natari, which is the longevity business bigger or smaller since COVID? You know, to you that might be quite you know, obvious, but I think, you know, the general public might be keen to know what's going on. You know, your work with actuaries and pensions, and you know, how has COVID impacted business in this space?
Yeah, that's a good question. I suppose where the way I think about longevity and how it impacts sort of financial markets, it manifests itself in sort of the demand for pension products and care products and so on. And I think, I mean, the demand has been probably sort of the demand to transfer some of that risk has been subdued by COVID and the sort of the market impact and uncertainty. So short-term impact, but I think that's a sort of a short-term, very much short-term impact, and we expect that sort of us to return to the long-term trend of lots more, you know, an aging population creating more demand for retirement products, retirement planning, care needs, and that will persist and that will come back, and we expect a, you know, actual growth in the longevity market in the medium to long term, definitely. So it might have some short-term implications, but that doesn't impact the long-term trend, I suppose, to manage your long-term your longevity risk and plan for the future. Yeah.
So in and amongst the chaos, there does appear to be some growth, and Harriet indeed touched on this. There's a lot of potential out there. So Harriet, how will longevity change aged care, and perhaps it might be useful also for you to, if you can, talk about your solutions and how, you know, how they differ potentially from co-housing concepts. But fundamentally, there's an opportunity out there, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of things to say there in terms of how longevity will affect aged care. I won't dwell on it too much because I mentioned it in my presentation about changing the approach to health and overall well-being, and having that as a much more integrated approach. But to touch on your other point about co-housing, I think multi-generational developments is the way forward. the moment it's quite segregated, and you run the risk of ghettoizing older people by sectioning them off in specific housing, and we do a lot of research with our potential customers and with our property owners as well, and there certainly is a subsection of people who want to stay living with their own cohort of people, but we are seeing a growing majority of people wanting to live in multi-generational environments. So we don't have the solutions for that, but I can see that that's growing, and certainly over the last couple of years we've worked with other developers, standard residential developers, who have been building for commuters or student housing, and looking at ways that we can build a truly multi-generational development. In fact, we opened our first retirement village within a wider development for the wider all age groups last year. They haven't opened their part of it yet, but that should be in the next year. So that will be really interesting to see the impact on people's well-being, just being around all age groups, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that sort of multi-generational, intergenerational thing just keeps on coming through, the importance of that. I've got a question, a really interesting one actually, from Shirley Ayers, which is, this kind of goes back to how Martin opened with that. What is going on in these individuals' hopes and aspirations? How do we challenge assumptions, the question is, and stereotypes about the hopes, needs and aspirations of older people? I thought, Harriet, you might like to come on this, and Mary afterwards, an expert in ageing, and perhaps Emily, you might want to respond to this. The hopes and needs and aspirations of older consumers, because if we can unlock that, we'll realise that longevity dividend.
Absolutely. I'm going to approach this from two perspectives. I'm going to approach it from a sector perspective, but also from my own discipline of marketing, because I think that marketing will need to lead that change in perception of older people. The first thing is to ask people, how do they want to be talked about? How do they perceive themselves? How do they relate to the messaging and the imagery that's shown? There's so many companies who target their brands at older people who just fall into lazy stereotypes that our customers don't relate to. And I'm not saying that everybody over the age of 55 is sprightly and can run a marathon. There are people who have real health needs, health care needs, but nobody feels that they're old. Nobody would say, oh yes, I definitely feel like an old person. It doesn't matter if you're 50 or if you're 80. You're as young as you feel, and so we need to react to how people want to be talked about and not assume, is what I would say.
Great. Mary, what's your take on it, in terms of addressing those stereotypes which clearly still exist, and the potential compression that older people are going to feel when younger people are finding themselves in unemployment, and what happens next for those people, and how do you address their hopes and needs in work?
Yeah, so first of all, I think COVID overall has been hugely unhelpful for the ageism narrative. The mass characterization of such a huge proportion of the population as being vulnerable was an easy early line that did untold damage. When we look at the stats, it's about obesity, it's about incidence of underlying contributory diseases. Admittedly, those increase with age. So I think COVID hasn't been helpful. How is it going to change it? It's made it more complicated. For people in work, I think we've got 2 or 3 things going. One is the internalized ageism that Emily referenced, which is people saying, I need to give way for a younger person. I think the other piece is a contracting workforce, and the either conscious or unconscious bias or lack of awareness of age discrimination legislation, which means that we will see we risk seeing older people being more likely to be made unemployed. And then third piece is the absolutely well evidenced that over 50, it's much harder to regain employment. That then will have a lot of long-term consequences. I think my single problem is the word age and old. And just as Helen said, nobody thinks of themselves like that, and different countries across the world define old as different. The UK has one of the youngest community defined definition ages of old anywhere in Europe. If you want to be younger, move to Greece.
Fascinating. So, but how do we learn from what the Greeks are doing? Is it just intrinsic to our culture? Is there, you know, is there
so it's not simple. If it were, that would be great. But we talked about housing earlier, and putting people in retirement villages. Research shows us that the vast majority of people want to be able to stay in their own homes if they can. So having communities who are intergenerational helps people to feel connected, helps them to feel happier, which gives them better mental health, which enables them to go out, which gives them better physical health, which helps their longevity. So it's not a single, it's housing or it's work or it's products and services. We need to address this quite holistically, which is why it's so complicated.
Yeah.
You know, and the Aging Society Grand Challenge tries to bring that all together. But as I think Martin said, government is and has been set by COVID, Brexit, events, dear boy, and that long-term strategic approach to government, society, economics keeps on getting put by the wayside.
That's interesting, and actually, Harriet, you and I have talked about the need for social connections and connectivity in retirement villages, and Audley seem to have been seeing a real growth in connectivity, haven't you, especially with the use of digital media recently?
Absolutely, yeah. I can see Emily would really like to respond. I'm going to call on her.
And no offence, Harriet, because I think retirement villages are absolutely great and have their place in society.
No, but I totally agree. It's part of a bigger picture. Definitely.
I suppose my eagerness was that I wanted to put a little positive spin about ageism. Let's say something like I could put out. Not ageism being good, but again, there's problematic stereotypes of generations. Stereotyping generations is also problematic, but we have a kind of generation that is aging, that is also kind of used to demanding things as a consumer. That's the kind of the historical world that the current generation that's growing older is growing into, and I think that helps. We're currently doing a project which is looking at the fact that, okay, so as we get older, we need certain adaptations in our home, right? We might need a grab rail, or we need a different kind of tap, or we need a different kind of appliance. And most of those things that are on the market are horrible, clinical stuff that you have in a hospital that you don't want in your house. So one of the pieces we're working at doing is a piece of innovation work to try and stimulate the market to say, can we make these things that people need a bit more desirable, a bit nicer? There's a huge business opportunity there. People need those things, but they're not going to buy them if they think it's a symbol of, like, a horrible symbol of aging. People are going to buy them if they think it's a nice thing to have in their home as well as needing them. And we also have a competition that we've just launched around redesigning the little icons. The icons that mean aging is like a little old lady with a walking stick. We've just launched a competition to try and redesign the aging icons. So all ideas welcome there.
I've been retweeting that one, Emily. I love it.
Brilliant. Listen, unfortunately, we've only got about 5 or so minutes until we close, and I wanted to bring Martin back in just to see what his thoughts are on the importance of prevention of ill health. And I know I know Home Instead is particularly interested in that, and actually this potentially also relates to some of the things Richard was talking about around, you know, ensuring for long-term health through, you know, hedging for longevity in the insurance sector. Those insurance guarantees that you were talking about is an interesting concept, and then you know, potentially we could close the conversation with a remark from Shaun. I wish we could carry on for another hour in this discussion. It's always the way, isn't it? That you know, this is the most interesting part, and you know, perhaps we can all, you know, this will be recorded. Perhaps this is part one, and then perhaps we can do a part two partners discussion further on down the line. But what do you think about that, Martin? About the importance of prevention?
I think it's one of the key things that we at Homestead focus on. So we've actually now started to develop, I think it was said before, completely agree in terms of the well-being and different types of support that surround our clients. But we've actually started to do a lot more healthcare at home now, and moving into that sphere, because you know, we generally believe, and I generally believe, home's the hospital wards of the future. There's going to be more and more healthcare and preventative healthcare done in people's own homes. One, because it's cheaper, two, and it's more cost efficient, but also it's where people want to be. So that's actually going to be key critical. And I think frailty is an interesting one, and obviously the frailty index the NHS released, I think it was last year, you know, people can be frail actually in the mid-30s, late 30s, and frailty is actually something, for one, in terms of you can redress, you can start to have a big effect on by actually putting some simple things in place to help and support that older person. And I think I would like to come back to the previous debate as well, and in terms of the different stereotypes and what have you. I think it's really important. I think it was Emily who said we need to listen to the voices of older people, and even on panels like this, you know, we're talking about older people, we're doing unto older people, but we need to be actually listening to older people and actually have them and get them to have a voice, which they don't often have. Either through in terms of, you know, so I think that's really important. But prevention is actually a key aspect and focus for Home Instead. I said we've moved into healthcare side, but in terms of the well-being, supporting the community, active exercise, in terms of mental health, it's absolutely key critical, and loneliness. That's so important as well in terms of that prevention aspect. So we're really doing a lot of key focuses in terms of how we can help and support our older generation. You're on mute, Redvers. We should have a pound fine for every time someone's on mute. I raise thousands.
Yeah, we would, wouldn't we? Yeah. Yeah, no, I'm conscious we're gonna close. Richard, do you have you know, any sort of comment on you know, the prevention of
prevention? Yeah, very briefly. I mean, prevention is definitely an area that is of relevance to insurance, because it can obviously help lower the, we know prevention care tech in the home can reduce the risk of falls, and that also then can slow down the progression of other conditions. So we know there are signs that's working, and insurers are definitely interested in looking at that. And I think also insurers can help fund some of those prevention solutions as well. So there's kind of lots of interesting opportunities in the future to bring those two things together. So yeah, definitely.
Fantastic. No, that's great. And then Shaun, you know, you're obviously very involved in innovation tech, and health tech is, you know, is a huge part of one of the solutions and how we tackle these challenges. How do you feel, you know, about the capacity for us to be able to get through this through innovation technology?
Yeah, thanks, Rivers. Yeah, I do, absolutely. I mean, I think we need to embrace innovation, but I guess the message I was saying earlier on, we need to also embrace the skills of experienced people within our workforce and bring them together. So I would say that's a critical moment. I mean, I would just finish, Rivers, if you like, because I'll just switch hats here from being an ILC partner to being an ILC trustee. And I would just say I think it's been a very valuable conversation. And I think what you raised at the very beginning about the question about how do we think that the ILC can be how the ILC can support in the future around the longevity agenda. I say it's with our partners. It's very much what we can do to support influencing government, using the wealth of research and data that we have available for us to support you in getting those messages across. All the points raised today were excellent. There are a number of institutions right across various industries and charities, etc., who all are very passionate about this. And if you listen to the panelists today, all of them are very passionate in what they believe. We as the ILC are really keen to keep promoting that, and we're keen to keep working with you and other parties for ideas to help them develop more research and support to add more influence to the agenda. And especially in this really difficult time we're all facing with this crisis, whether it's to do with whether we think there's going to be a second round, what's going to happen to the aging population, the care homes, etc. We've all got a role to play in this with our families and our employees. And anything that we can do and we want to do as an ILC to support you in getting that agenda across, we're here and we want to do that.
Fantastic, thank you, Shaun. And no, you're absolutely right. And government now is looking for answers to some of these massive questions. They're ready and willing, and we're poised. So we just must continue to engage and keep the pressure and do everything we can with our partners to help unlock that longevity dividend. So I am told that my colleagues behind the scenes have had a few connectivity issues. So we'll try and move the slides on just a few sort of closing slides. But if the slides don't work, don't worry. I can just talk through them. I mentioned at the beginning, and Shaun certainly touched on this, that we are keen to connect with all of you around this question. Do contact me after if you want to learn more about the ILC Partners program. Not only can you get involved in webinars like this, you can benefit from our expertise, our business intelligence, our networks, and we can position your brand right at the centre of debate around longevity. We can give you that platform. Just a word around some up and coming events that we have. If you can move the slide on, please. So we have our prevention launch. We are launching our global prevention project. So this is around delivering prevention in an ageing world. And this is taking place on the 29th of September. And we've got speakers from the World Economic Forum, the World Federation of Public Health Associations. So please do register at ilcuk.org.uk/events. We also have our Future of Aging conference. If we can just move on to the slide. So we'll be holding this year's Future of Aging conference virtually on Thursday, the 3rd of December. We're going to explore how we can ensure that policy and practice works for today's as well as tomorrow's older people, so very much in the vein of what we've been discussing today. Confirmed speakers so far include Sir Andrew Dillon and Sir Jonathan Porritt and Baroness Sally Greengross, ILC's Chief Executive, among others. So make sure to register now at futureofaging.org.uk and make the most of our early bird prices. Our next webinar will be on Thursday the 24th, where we're inviting to join us on a discussion on how Hong Kong and Singapore are responding to the challenges of an ageing society. So if you're interested in sponsoring this webinar, engaging, then please do get in touch with me. For all news on ILC's latest webinars and to stay up to date with us, please visit our website, ilcuk.org.uk, join our mailing list and follow us on Facebook and Twitter at ILC UK. Thank you.
Thanks, Redford. Bye.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you so much.